Imagine having a job where every single decision that you make is a life and death decision. Now, also imagine in that same job, if you make the wrong decision, everything that you own, your house, your car, even the money in your bank account is wiped out. Now, could you do that job confidently? Better yet, would you even be willing to take that risk to do that job? You might be thinking, what kind of job is this and what type of rules are these? My friend, that all involves qualified immunity. And today, I want to talk about it. So let's get into it. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to The Human Side with Officer Jill. I'm a 16-year police officer in Los Angeles. And today I want to talk about a term you may have heard, a doctrine even that you may have heard, and it's called qualified immunity. I want to talk about the definition, the purpose, and the history surrounding qualified immunity. Let's get right into the definition. What is qualified immunity? This definition can be a little muddy, so I want to read it to you as it states so that you are clear as mud as to what it means. So the definition is, as stated, qualified immunity is a legal doctrine that protects government officials, including police. And we're going to go into more detail because it's not just police who are protected by qualified immunity, including police officers from personal civil lawsuits, unless they violate clearly established constitutional rights. What the heck is clearly established? I'm going to tell you. Clearly established means that a specific rule or law already exists. Easy way to understand what clearly established means. Basically means that a specific rule or law already exists, so a police officer knows whether their actions are legal or not. So if there is a clear example from a past court decision, the officer can be held accountable if they violate it. An example of that is one of the biggest questions that I get involves traffic stops. There was a Supreme Court case, Pennsylvania versus Mims in 1977, which established that officers can order a driver out of a vehicle during a traffic stop for safety reasons. This precedent means officers following this practice are protected under qualified immunity because there is already an established standard. Hopefully that's clear for you. Just in case it isn't clear, check this quick video out.
Qualified immunity simply exists to protect government officials from civil liability when they follow department and/or organizational policy, training, and the law. Simply put, it protects governmental employees who follow the rules and regulations set forth by the laws they are sworn to uphold.
Now, who does qualified immunity apply to? Who benefits from qualified immunity? Oftentimes when we hear this term qualified immunity, we think immediately of police, which in fact it does apply to police officers, but is not just limited to police. There is a whole list of officials that it also applies to. Qualified immunity applies to government officials, city council members, firefighters, teachers, school administrators, state lawmakers, members of Congress, and many more. Now, let's talk about the history, the origin. Where does qualified immunity come from? This goes way back, y'all. This goes back to 1871, where the Civil Rights Act of 1871 was passed, specifically Section 1983, which allowed individuals to sue state officials for constitutional violations. In fact, this act was actually named the Ku Klux Klan Act. What was the purpose of the act? The purpose was essentially to reduce post-Civil War racial violence that allowed people to sue states and governments who violated their constitutional rights. Now, that Civil Rights Act was altered during another court case in 1967. It was Pearson versus Ray. And basically, this was the first form of induction of qualified immunity. This Supreme Court ruling stated that police officers were immune from civil lawsuits if they acted in good faith. Now, there was another transition in 1982 during another court case that was between Harlow and Fitzgerald. This is where the qualified immunity doctrine as we know it was created. Now, during this court case, they removed the term good faith, and the court established that officials are protected unless they violated clearly established constitutional rights, which we've already defined. Now, I want to clear up some of the misconceptions on what qualified immunity actually is. What does it actually do? One of the ways to understand what something is to also understand what it is not. Let's take a look at what it is not.
Qualified immunity is a type of legal immunity, and it is not automatically given to every law enforcement officer. Qualified immunity applies to civil liability and does not apply to criminal liability. Additionally, qualified immunity does not protect law enforcement officers from criminal charges, and it does not protect them from internal investigations, discipline, or termination. Finally, and most importantly, qualified immunity does not protect law enforcement officers who knowingly violate the law.
Now, what are some of the controversies and criticisms? One is that it creates a space for a lack of accountability for officers. And some critics argue it allows officers to avoid consequences for misconduct. There are also concerns of legal challenges, whereas the requirement for a clearly established precedence makes it difficult for plaintiffs to succeed in lawsuits. Recent research has shown that qualified immunity is not granted 100% of the time. In fact, stats actually show that qualified immunity is only granted 53% of the time, which means 47% of the time it is not granted. Where do we stand now as far as qualified immunity? Where are we now in society? Obviously, we've had some challenges as it relates to law enforcement and the community, and there has been a lot of talk for reform. Now, I can tell you as a proud police officer, I believe there is always room for improvement. I'm not against reform in any kind of way, as long as it still allows officers to do their job well and right. There have been some legislative efforts, such as the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, which was introduced in 2021. Now, this act aimed to eliminate qualified immunity, but it faced significant obstacles in Congress. There are some states who have adopted and reformed their policing and removed qualified immunity. Some of those states are New Mexico and Colorado, which have enacted actual laws that eliminates qualified immunity for police officers. And it allows individuals to sue officers civilly if their constitutional rights are violated. Now let's take a look at what some of the changes have been in Colorado involving qualified immunity.
A new state law allows police officers to be held financially responsible for their actions on the job. That means families can sue police officers, leaving officers on the hook to pay up to thousands of their own money.
The summer of 2020, when lawmakers passed a qualified immunity ban for police officers into law. It allows officers to be sued individually with a cap of up to $25,000.
And this is individual actions.
This state law has sparked heated debate from law enforcement agencies in the state. It was part of the law enforcement accountability law that passed in Colorado a few months after the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin.
Now, some of the concerns of removing qualified immunity are not only are we going to lose officers, but we're going to have a difficult time hiring officers. Additional concerns are officers having to make decisions with even more weight on it. Like I said in the beginning, imagine if you had a job where every decision that you made was a life and death decision. Well, that's policing. Essentially, every decision that we make could affect you, the community member, my partner, and my own life. When you do that type of job that has such significance and weight on just on your decision making alone, it's often not a good idea to add additional weight on that person who are making those decisions. Now, the concerns are Officers who do not have that support or don't have that assurance that when they are making decisions in good faith and trying to do the right thing, the last thing you want them to be thinking about in that moment of making that life and death decision is, oh my God, am I going to lose my house? Oh my God, am I going to lose my car? Oh my God, am I going to have to pay out $25,000? Where am I going to get $25,000? There's already enough chaos in the brain trying to make the right decision that is not going to result in someone losing their life and or getting hurt. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of different people in this job, and I ask questions. I try to find ways to learn and improve and just kind of get an idea of what's going on. And I remember I was working with one of our training officers who's responsible for training a lot of our probationary officers. I remember asking, what are some of the concerns? What are some of the challenges? What are some of the issues that you are seeing in some of our new officers? And I've heard this from other training officers who are actually in the field training these officers. And every time I ask a training officer this question, immediately they say that they are having difficulty making decisions and that they are second guessing what they know to do. Now, why do you think that is? They've been trained. Our department has some of the best training in the world. Arguably, I'll hold that statement up to any person. So it's not necessarily the training. It's not necessarily that they don't know what to do. It's that they are afraid of making the wrong decision and afraid of becoming the headline. They're afraid of being overly criticized when in fact all they want to do is help you and keep people safe. Like I stated in the beginning, could you or would you be willing to take this risk to do this type of job, knowing that every decision that you made in good faith could potentially result in you losing everything that you own? Now, in Colorado, there have been some significant effects to the removal of qualified immunity. In fact, some police departments have noticed 65% of their workforce leave the department. Obviously, that's a major issue. Now, with that being said, there have been recent support from President-elect Donald Trump. Let's take a look at what he has to say.
I am also going to indemnify all those policemen that were shaking my hand back there. You better be listening. Police officers, law enforcement, please listen. But we're going to indemnify police officers and law enforcement officials throughout the United States. They're going to be indemnified. We're going to pay them for their costs, for their lawyers. Policemen have to go, in many cases, hire a lawyer to protect themselves. The state doesn't want to get involved. Policemen are forced not to do anything when they want to, and under the threat of losing their pension, their house, their family, they lose everything, and they're afraid to move. They have to be. Anybody would be. They lose their house, their family, they lose everything. They lose their pension, and we're going to indemnify them, do the job. They can do the job, and they want to do the job.
As you can see, the new president-elect has expressed very strong support for qualified immunity. Now, you may be thinking, thank you for all that information. Thank you for the definition. Thank you for giving me more understanding on what qualified immunity is, Jill. But let's get to the good stuff. What do you think? What is your opinion? What is my opinion as an officer? Now, I personally do not think that officers should have a blank check to do things wrong. I don't think anyone should have that. I don't think our president should have that. I don't think that at all. However, I think it is very important that when I do my job, I don't have to constantly second guess my decisions, which could then put myself, my partners, and the community in danger. I do understand the uniqueness of this job. I understand that we are required to make split-second decisions, and oftentimes we don't have all the information. And most officers are making the best decision that is going to hopefully lead to anyone and everyone involved being safe. So I myself, I am in favor of qualified immunity. Obviously, there is a little bias, but I am not just in support of qualified immunity just because I'm an officer. I think it's really important for officers to know that they have support. And not having that support from qualified immunity to protect officers who are honestly doing the best they can with the information that they have and the resources available to them really isn't just a disservice to the officers. It's also a disservice to you, the community. And you may be thinking, how? I explained some of the issues that we're having with some of our recruits. But the reality is we're having them with our veteran officers as well. Officers are concerned and they're overthinking the right decisions that they know to make from their training because they're so concerned with what could potentially happen afterwards. Now, it is important for us to understand that our decisions have consequences. As people, as human beings, we all know that decisions have consequences. And no one knows that more than officers. But to add additional stress on simple human beings, because officers are human beings too, it does not put the officer in the best mindset and the best emotional mindset to serve you to the best of their ability. After hearing the history, the definition, and who qualified immunity applies to, what are your thoughts? Are you for it? Or is it a way for officers not to be held accountable? I would love to hear your comments below. Remember, as always, I'm open to having a conversation with anyone regarding anything policing. And if you would like to do that, my contact information is in the description of this video. And remember, if you show me your human side, I'll show you mine. All right, y'all. Peace.